War sometimes begins with silence, a silence that can be more menacing than gunfire. In the winter of 1944, American soldiers in the Ardennes faced an enemy they couldn't see: the cold. The snow muffled every sound, turning the forest into a world of white and stillness. But this quiet was a warning, not a comfort. The cold seeped through uniforms, numbing bodies and minds, sapping the will to fight. In the Ardennes, survival itself became a battle. Soldiers fought on two fronts, against the German army and against the relentless winter. Simple tasks, cleaning a rifle, eating a meal, became ordeals. The cold was everywhere, a constant adversary that wore down even the strongest. Shivering was the body's first defence, but as temperatures dropped, confusion and exhaustion set in. For these men, the fight was not just for territory, but for the warmth that kept them alive. Every day was a struggle to keep the cold from claiming another victim. In December 1944. The Allies thought victory was near. The Ardennes seemed quiet, a place to rest, not to fight. But on December 16th, the silence exploded as German forces launched a surprise attack, the Battle of the Bulge. The offensive came with brutal winter weather, fog, snow, and freezing cold, grounding Allied planes and giving the Germans an edge. American troops, thinly spread and unprepared, were quickly surrounded. The forests became a maze of danger, every shadow a threat. In Bastogne, the 101st Airborne was encircled, cut off from supplies and forced to endure both enemy fire and the merciless cold. Ammunition and food ran low. Frostbite and exhaustion set in. Yet, against all odds, the soldiers held their ground. The Ardennes winter was not just a backdrop, it was a weapon in the battle itself. The American army was unprepared for winter's fury. Expecting a quick victory, commanders failed to issue proper cold-weather gear. Soldiers wore thin jackets and leather boots, useless against snow and sub-zero temperatures. Wet, frozen boots led to numb feet and frostbite. Rifles jammed, engines stalled, and even food froze solid. Every aspect of life became a struggle, not just against the enemy, but against the cold. The lack of preparation turned winter into a deadly foe. For many, inadequate gear was as dangerous as any bullet. The cold brought a new kind of casualty, one that crept in slowly and left lasting scars. Trench foot and frostbite became rampant. Feet soaked and frozen for days would swell, blister and sometimes rot, forcing amputations. Frostbite struck exposed skin, turning it numb, white and waxy, sometimes beyond saving. Many soldiers didn't realize the damage until it was too late. The pain of thawing frostbitten limbs was excruciating. The long-term effects could last a lifetime. During the Battle of the Bulge, cold injuries sidelined thousands, sometimes more than enemy fire. Every lost soldier weakened the line. The cold was as effective as the German army at draining American strength. These injuries weren't about weakness. They were the result of systemic failure. Soldiers were trapped, stay in the foxhole and risk injury, or leave and risk death. The cold was relentless, ending the war for many before a bullet ever found them. The scars, physical and mental, would remain long after the snow melted. The British Army faced the same winter, but with a different outcome. Years of experience taught them to treat the cold as a predictable threat. British soldiers wore insulated boots and practiced strict foot discipline, changing socks, drying feet, and keeping spares warm. Layered uniforms trapped heat, and officers enforced routines to keep men healthy. This wasn't about better gear alone, it was about knowledge and discipline. The British approach was systematic. Survival routines were drilled into every soldier. Regular inspections kept cold injuries low. In contrast, American troops lacked these habits and paid the price. The Battle of the Bulge forced the US Army to learn hard lessons, fast. Preparation and discipline, not just bravery, determined who survived the winter. With little help from above, American soldiers relied on ingenuity. They stuffed paper, cardboard and letters into their clothes for insulation. Boots were lined with straw or grass, and burlap sacks wrapped around ankles for extra warmth. Ponchos became makeshift roofs or ground sheets to keep dry. Fires were built in secret to dry socks and warm bodies, despite the risk. Every scrap of material was repurposed in the fight against the cold. These acts of resourcefulness were a form of resistance, refusing to surrender to the elements. Even when official systems failed, the soldiers' creativity kept hope alive. The earth itself became a refuge. Soldiers dug deep foxholes and dugouts, burrowing below the frost line for warmth and shelter. These makeshift shelters, covered with ponchos or blankets, shielded them from wind and snow. Pine boughs, straw or cardboard lined the floors, keeping bodies off the frozen ground. Inside, the temperature was higher, offering precious relief. But these shelters had risks: dampness, poor ventilation, and the ever-present threat of collapse. Still, going underground was a primal survival instinct. For many, these holes in the earth were the only defence against a relentless, invisible enemy. In the Ardennes, the ground itself became a soldier's last sanctuary. The Battle of the Bulge changed the US Army forever. The suffering led to new winter gear, better training, and a new respect for the environment. Cold weather centres were established and layered clothing became standard. But the greatest lesson was about teamwork and resilience. Soldiers survived by sharing warmth, food and discipline. The bonds forged in the cold proved as vital as any weapon. Today, their struggle reminds us nature is a force to respect, not underestimate. Preparation, discipline and ingenuity are the keys to survival on the battlefield and beyond. The story of the Ardennes is a tribute to those who endured, and a warning for the future. In every crisis, it's not just strength, but adaptability and community that see us through.